This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, just ambling about Madrid. Starting to rain actually. So always, every single time we come to Madrid, it's like way better weather than it is back home in England. But yeah, this time apparently it's quite decent weather back home, and more or less for our entire visit here, 10 days, it's going to be raining. That's not lashing rain or anything, but it is sort of, a heavy drizzle every single day, which is very unwelcome. And feel like I'm kind of not getting my holiday in a way because of that. Although there's been a few other factors kind of curbing that. Anyway, was up late last night. It was 2 nights ago. And I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember which one. It might be Film Spotting, but I'm not 100% sure which podcast it was. But they were talking about the film Grand Theft Hamlet, which just came out. And it's a film I remember hearing about this not even as a film. I remember hearing about the fact that people were trying to stage Hamlet, I feel like I heard about it before it was a film, but maybe it was already a film, I'm not sure, but I remember hearing about this a while back, that they were trying to put on a production of Hamlet within GTA Online, the online component of GTA 5. And you hear stories like that. I'm quite plugged into like gaming news, and so I hear kind of like wacky gaming stories all the time. Like that story stood out no more than a story I would hear almost on a daily basis. It was just like, oh, this is a fun, gimmicky, novelty little meme thing. But anyway, no reason to really dig any deeper. And I guess I'd heard, some mentions here and there about the film, and always just sort of dismissed it as like, I get it. I get the joke. I don't really need any more from this. Just like, once you're aware of it on a conceptual level, it felt like you'd kind of like rinsed it dry from all of its value, and spending, an hour and a half watching it play out or whatever just seemed really unappealing. But then, because it popped up on one of the podcasts I listened to, and again, I think it was Film Spotting, but I'm not sure. I think that in combination with maybe seeing it on the BFI Sight and Sound Best Films of the Year list or something like that, kind of made me go, oh, this is actually getting like interest from like film cinephile types, which surprised me because, again, I had sort of dismissed it as just a meme project. There's an old genre called machinima. I believe it's called machinima, which is like the films made within a game. So like you and your friends make a series of YouTube shorts and you make them in Halo, and they have a narrative or something. And that's a big scene that I've never had any interest in, but it's been around for a long time. So this is kind of like linked to that, but because it was, the most revered writer of all time that they were working from, and I guess just the kind of juxtaposition between Shakespeare and GTA just made it interesting. So yeah, I thought that, combined with the fact that it seems to be being talked about in these like cinephile circles, makes me curious to see if there's anything more there. And then you said that you had thrown it on kind of out of curiosity, and you were halfway through it. I was like, oh, well, if he's watching it, then we can chat about it. So it's kind of like everything is sort of coming together. And so last night I threw it on, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I think when I spoke to you briefly, believe it was yesterday about it, you'd said that, yeah, it's all right. It's like, I'm not like wowed by it, but if you watch it soon, we'll talk about it. But, I don't know how motivated you were to continue. I don't know if you have finished it yet, but, so I kind of went in with those expectations. Like I probably was helped by having like my own innate skepticism of the project, then sort of like compounded by your, it didn't seem to be setting your world on fire, at least halfway through viewing the movie. So I think I had kind of assumed that generally what I'd be watching was the actual production of Hamlet. And then I was like, well, I'll just watch Laurence Olivier do Hamlet or something. Like, it's not novel enough to me that it's in GTA world that I would watch it. I can watch a 30-second clip of that and go, oh, interesting. But that's not what this film's about. It's actually a documentary about trying to put on a production of Hamlet in GTA Online, and which I learned from that podcast, and that is another thing, I guess, that kind of drew me into it. Sorry for this background noise here. I'm so trying to pick quiet back streets while I send this voice note, but I'm also in the center of one of the, major world capitals, so quiet back streets are not necessarily that quiet. Anyway, I think it's a classic case of like, okay, it's a ragtag group of outsiders trying to go up against the odds and pull off something massive and unassailable, and that, or at least that's how it's presented in the film, and that is a great sort of frame to hang this film on. I don't think there's any other way I could see this film working. So it's full of interesting stuff that's just kind of, we could probably talk for hours about some of the themes of the film without even touching in the film. Themes like the pandemic, video games, employment, arts, just, I guess, creativity within the confines of, or like sort of set parameters of a system that you're working in. Not to speak too loftily about it, but I've always found it interesting playing video games, as I love to do, and kind of pushing up against the intended limits or the intended funneling or guardrails, or like basically what this space was designed to accommodate, and then kind of doing your own thing in there. Now, I've certainly never pushed it to this extent of like doing something in a game that like is literally 100% removed from the intended activity within that space. But I have certainly anytime, like I'll often play a game where it's like you're supposed to be playing it like gung-ho adrenaline, like just racing through, meleeing everyone, and I'm like stealthing around it or something like that, where you feel like you're going, oh, all right, they didn't want me to do this, but I'm kind of like breaking the game a little bit. And beyond video games, I just think like generally occupying spaces, be they virtual or real, there is always something fascinating about like, how can I reappropriate this space or this society or whatever it is to pull off my own really niche and specific way of being that I think kept me engaged with this film a lot. I've played GTA Online a bit. I've played through and completed GTA 5, which is the same map, I believe, although there might be some areas in online that aren't in the main game. I'm not sure, because online's been around for a very long time now, and I haven't checked in on it since back when GTA 5 sort of came out, so it's probably fleshed out a lot. But the film opens with this title card describing the world of GTA Online as being like beautiful and violent, and obviously it's stunning. It's and it's also so ugly as well. Like it's no, I don't mean ugly in terms of the violence, but just the garish costumes and graphic design and stuff like that. It's a fascinating aesthetic environment, especially when you're filtering it through like Shakespearean dialogue and these very posh kind of protagonists who are like, you imagine from the kind of arty intelligentsia and stuff, and combining that with like the sort of like trashy aesthetic of GTA, or like especially with like GTA Online, where the way people are dressed with like crazy costumes and stuff like that. But then obviously like stunning sunsets and stuff. It's got an aesthetic that is, I don't want to say all of its own, but a rare aesthetic for a film. And especially seeing as it's all in engine. So it's kind of like, it's not an animated film, but it's a 3D model film, which is maybe the only film that I can think of that is not an animate film, but is all 3D modeled assets. Reminded me a little bit of that film about Pepe the Frog, in terms of just being like super current, cutting edge, beyond 21st century, like literally like past decade type of current aesthetic that you're getting on screen, which is cool. That's always exciting. And what else? I liked watching the film, thinking about the making of the film, thinking about the artifice and then the reality. Like you get the impression that the two guys making it quite early on realized the potential of the project, and then they started kind of goading the story in a particular way, which we've seen a million times before in documentary filmmaking. That thing of like, okay, this is genuinely two people having an argument or whatever, but they're also making the film, and they're being very intentional with the way that they're arguing, with the way that they're standing, and even like emoting during the arguments and stuff like that, with the way that they're deliberately building out character arcs and stuff like that. And that was sort of like making the Hamlet production was one project they were working on, and making Grand Theft Hamlet was another project they were working on. And you kind of get like on a meta level to see the making of both projects, because anytime someone like does an emote or whatever, you realize that's not involuntary, like that is for us, for our benefit. And I love the characters, like the ragtag group they get together. It's a shame that they couldn't do it from people just that they met in GTA. They obviously had to pull in their actor friends or just general real life friends. But that's all right, because for starters, we got the one guy that he plays five-a-side football with who bails on them, and that's a great kind of story and a great little arc in the way that's resolved, and it's hilarious when he shoots him from the train and just goes, oh. But secondly, they do manage to bring in like about 3 or 4 recurring characters that are literally just plucked from the streets of San Andreas. And those characters might not really have it in them to be delivering long soliloquies, but they massively add to the film. So it's kind of like a mixture between the two. I think if it didn't involve any kind of recruiting whatsoever or socializing whatsoever with the actual gen pop of GTA Online, then that would be something that's really missing from the game. But I think they get enough of that in the film to kind of work. So yeah, that was a good aspect of it. I know a fair bit about these kind of online worlds. I've never been a part of one of them. I've never, like, I might have played things like Fortnite and PUBG for like a couple of hours or something, or an hour or whatever, but I've never played it for months on end, which I think is what you kind of need to do to like actually really be a part of that culture and that community. Socially, of course, you might just be playing like a video game where like you're just doing the game, you're just playing Counter-Strike and you're just trying to shoot people in the head and that's it. But like to the point where it starts to step into like socializing in the lounge area and meeting people and like dressing in a particular way because that's how you like to express yourself in game. And you know, these worlds have so much they're so huge for people who have who are working through their identities. I don't want to be like overly reductive, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but like, you know, I know there's a lot of trans people in these games. There's a lot of people who are maybe from backgrounds that are very different from how they are on screen. We meet one guy, for example, he's like a Syrian immigrant to Finland, and like in the game he's an alien. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like reading too much into this. I know probably majority of people in these games are just like, hop on, this skin looks cool, it's got nothing to do with my identity, I'm just like playing a video game. But just from watching documentaries and stuff about online spaces that are more social, that have a kind of social component, I think there's a lot of interesting subject matter about identity, but they don't do a deep dive into this. In fact, whenever it comes up, they actually almost deliberately step away from it rather than prying, which is nice. They're quite respectful people. Like, they're not really like trying to exploit anyone that comes into that they come in contact with for content. Like, I could totally imagine the guy saying that he's like a Syrian immigrant from that lives in Finland now and wants to recite some of the Quran, and them sort of rubbing their hands together and go, "Oh, what can we get what story can we get here to add into our movie?" And they don't do that, which is really cool. Like, the only people that they exploit, if you will, for content is themselves. They kind of mine their own personal lives in a quite affecting way. They don't go too overboard with it, and also found this film very funny. There was a lot of moments that are punctuated by someone being killed or some little message popping up on the HUD that just perfectly undercuts the moment. Again, this is a unique film. I've never seen a film like this, and it's got a lot of unique tricks up its sleeve of like, well, this is stuff that could happen in GTA. This is stuff that happens in video games. This is, you know, yeah, it's a collage of interesting stuff. And also interesting for us now, 2025, as I record this, the pandemic essentially feels like it never happened to me. I know the world's changed. I know that our lives have changed and stuff like that, but I don't really think about that. Just in the same way that I don't really think about the Black Plague, even though that's massively changed our lives. It's like, once something's over, you just sort of take the new fabric of the world as like, well, that's just the way it is, almost. And I don't like listening to them talk about like being sat at home and trying to like maintain some sort of like social activity online and this, that, and the other. Like, once I hear that now, it takes me back. I'm like, oh shit, man, it was such a time. We really lived through that. But, you know, there hasn't been many pieces of art that I've interacted with that have done that for me. Just, I guess, because, you know, we haven't yet like made them. I don't know. There's a lot of films I've seen that you go, oh, they made this during the pandemic. That's why there's very few people in it. I watched The Lost Daughter the other day, and it was like, oh, that's why it's set on a Greek island, but there's barely any Greek people in it. Or, you know, there's that classic with Malcolm and Marie. There was a Zendaya movie where it's like, oh, there's only 2 actors in the whole movie. That kind of thing. So seen a lot of those where I'm like, now I can see that this was made during the pandemic because of the kind of like, you know, there's little ways in which it sort of shows its hand. But in terms of something that's kind of directly about the pandemic, this is probably the most essential art piece that so far that I'm aware of, as a sort of like, you know, when they're writing the lists down the line, or like the 5 films that Host is another one. And Host is about the pandemic. It's not just taking advantage of the fact that they can't do much. It's literally set during the pandemic, during social isolating and stuff like that. So I guess Host and this are like the 2 films, and interestingly that both of them are, in terms of the technology that they're set within, one a Zoom call, the other GTA Online, they're very different from 99% of movies that you see. So anyway, yeah, I liked the movie. I really was along for the journey. I was charmed by the characters. I was invested in their story. I wasn't too irritated by some of the sort of false drama that pops up. I think that it was 90% earnest, with just a little bit of a let's push things a bit. And yeah, at the end of it, I was kind of a little bit like sad for, I think it's Mark. I'm not sure if his name is Mark, but Mark is the character that doesn't have a wife and kids. And even just like, that's another subject matter that this film minds, is like good friends, different lives. Like you and I, we have different lives, but they're not complete. Like they are radically different because I have kids and you don't have kids, but we also both have a partner, both have a full-time job in the UK. Both, we're sort of like the same economic brackets and same age, and like we've got so many things that kind of even like come from the same part of Ireland and stuff. So we've got so much in common that we're not having to like constantly bridge the gap. But like, let's say I was really good friends with someone who was like 20 years old. That would be like the gulf between us would be such a huge part of the relationship. Likewise, if I was like really good friends with someone who was like living in a developing country, it's like from a developing country, like, some like kind of poorer person in Colombia or something, like the gulf between us would be different, would be huge. But over the years, obviously I've got people like you that I've grown up with, that I've been good friends with, and then our lives have kind of deviated, maybe ideologically, maybe economically, maybe geographically, maybe religiously, like you name it. I've come to find the subject of like friendship that transcends certain differences quite interesting. And at the end of the film, we get like, for about 5 seconds, some like actual live action footage and photography and stuff. And it's the only time in the movie that we get that. And we see the real characters. And Mark, and it could be some people look older than they do. Like some people turn gray when they're in their late 20s, but he looks like he's about 15 years older than Sam. I might be getting the names mixed up here. And I was like, oh, interesting. He mentions he's alone in the world. His last living relative has just died. For the whole movie, the kind of rhetoric, the way that they kind of interact with each other, the way that they express themselves, like they seem like they're the same age. Their in-game avatars are the same age. I don't know if there's older people avatars available in GTA Online. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But it again made me think, okay, this is someone who's like in this virtual world, they're the same age. But in real life, this is another, maybe, and I think it's a bit rude to kind of like project and read too much and like assume too much. But like, I did wonder if maybe this Mark character is like, no, the in-game avatar of me is how old I am, kind of on an identity level. In the real world, I'm significantly older than that, and that's not how I sort of see myself or how I feel or whatever. So, it's interesting stuff. Again, this is all subtextual. It's not really discussed. The film has got plenty on its plate for an hour and a half to allow you to just be entertained by that, but then also think about some of the other concepts that the film touches. But yeah, I really liked it. I'm wondering if the film came around for you in the second half, or Or if you didn't like it, what was the main blockers for you? Because it just really charmed me and had a really good time with it.
Hey man, just after listening to your Grand Theft Hamlet voice note there, sounds like it's to give one of your weather updates. It's a rainy time in Madrid, but it's sunny as hell here, and although it's cold, it's walking in the park weather. It's blue skies. It's funny. I don't normally reveal my thoughts to you about any movie before you've had a chance to watch it, but I think when you messaged me the other day and I gave my thoughts very briefly about Grand Theft Hamlet, it was not well handled, and it almost gave a completely false impression over my thoughts in one way, but in another way it's still somewhat accurate. It's funny because I absolutely loved the first half of the movie, but when you messaged me and I was halfway through it, it began to turn. And it was probably more than half, and it began to turn in my enjoyment. So by the time you asked me my thoughts, in a very fleeting moment, it was very much my immediate feeling at that time of the film rather than how I felt about the first half. And let's just forget about this whole half, or whatever amount of time. I'll just tell you what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it. There's a kind of American movie, that documentary, feel to this that I really enjoyed. There's this type of quest to make something when you don't have the tools to do it, maybe when you don't have the talent to do it, when you don't have the manpower to do it. I don't know. And it is interesting how people play games. We've often talked about how we play role play games and how we play as different characters almost, whereas with the morality of choices and how we go about decision making, you said you always try and play it as yourself and you scrutinize over decisions and what to do and the best way to go about things. Now, that's not saying in Call of Duty you're going around like Andrew Garfield in Hacksaw Ridge. It's within reason, but you always try and ponder the consequences of your actions. Whereas I'm the type of person who's playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I'm trying to start off as a noble version, and then before you know it, I'm just murdering a guy. Well, actually, I'm trying to rob a guy at the side of the road because he's got better gear. And then when the robbery goes wrong, have to kill him. And yeah, I feel bad about it, but I quickly rewrite that story in my head in terms of, oh, well, after that moment, my character went good. But I'm a lot more opportunist, and I do try and play it a certain way, but I don't really try and play it as myself always. I'm very all over the place with that. But what I did find was really fascinating about this documentary is you have two people having a existential crisis almost in the heart of the pandemic, which again, I'm the type of person who forgets things soon after they happen. Very much the emotion of something. I can have a memory of working from home and seeing a death toll and not people not having jobs during the pandemic. And I don't think we were talking much or if at all during the pandemic. Oh no, I think we were by then. But not in the level of detail we would now about that. But when I was watching this, it did transport me there at times in the feeling how it felt at the time. That type of uncertainty and unsureness. Now, for me, I loved it. I actually loved the pandemic. I got to stay at home. I got to watch movies. It was a time in my life where I had to press the pause button. So it couldn't have happened at a better time for me. But I'd forgotten the feeling of the people I know and people who were definitely affected by it and had a terrible time about it. So to see these two characters having a existential crisis, especially because they're in the arts. And I actually remember one of the ads they're talking about where they're saying, oh, retrain like Fatima to be a engineer. I remember that ad very well because not only is this a movie about the pandemic, it's the movie about people in England during the pandemic. So the level of reference that we get in this is very close to home. The arts were completely shut down. You couldn't go to the cinema. A lot of people that I know in the arts had no job and no work, and people were being taken off tour at home, twiddling their thumbs. And we also saw that affected celebrities. And there's something to be said as well for people who need an audience and people who need to create and people that need to be seen to perform. And I think that's some of the problems I ran into this documentary a little bit later that rubbed me the wrong way that I'll get into. This need to perform. I remember there's this video about the pandemic, not about the pandemic, but during the pandemic of Gail Gadot and all these celebrities trying to sing this song. I think it's a John Lennon song, and by the end of it, it goes back to Gal Gadot, and she has this kind of smug look in her face, like she's done something and done something for us, and it just gives you a kind of insight into what drives the performer and what they think they give to the audiences sometimes when they don't, and what they do when they're minus the material of the talented directors and the talented writers. Now, what I liked about this is the whole ragtag Shaggy Dog story conception of trying to make something, trying to build art, trying to perform, trying to find an audience, trying to connect. I thought that was really good. And trying to do this in a world like GTA Online is a very interesting contrast. It's almost like something like, is it Idiocracy? Or something that you see in an episode of Rick and Morty, which I know you don't like the show, but it's just a kind of batshit concept where they are trying to like bring Shakespeare to the most violent universe in the galaxy if it was Rick and Morty, or even if it was like an episode of the TV show Oz, where they're trying to bring Shakespeare to the violent prisoners. In fact, I think they actually do. Maybe they do bring Hamlet, in fact, in the final season of Oz, but I can't remember. But it's like they're trying to bring some bit of it's probably the wrong words, but some bit of culture and something different to GTA Online, a land where people are basically free to be the most insane, over the top version of, I wouldn't say themselves, but in and I wouldn't even say it's the insane version of etiquette, but it's where people go to create mayhem, and to see this vestige of the complete opposite of violence and the chaos trying to be started in this land was really good. And at this point, it's right up my alley. It's almost like the scene where a high school teacher goes to a poor school and tries to rally these kids and show them the joys of Shakespeare. It's almost like they're trying to bring that to GTA Online, and that works really well. It's very funny. A lot of scenes where I was laughing out loud, and it was just that type of great comedy that that's very hard to find, I guess. And just the characters that they meet along the way, like the Spanish guy, and obviously you're seeing these people approach, but the people are trigger happy. You pretty much presume it's going to be a bloodbath every time that someone arrives, and then you find out that the person who showed up to audition for Hamlet is a 45-year-old accountant who is using her nephew's laptop, and these various people that become the characters in this movie. It's, it is quite endearing, and I do agree that they don't go for the easy type of manipulation and oh, let's get this Syrian guy or wherever he's from. He's probably not from Syria, but the guy who's immigrated who recites the Quran. And obviously we get a lot of great scenes, like where they meet in the property for rehearsals, and someone's trying to bomb the fuck out of their building while this happening. And you see fighter jets showing up and police showing up and murdering them while they're trying to do auditions and stuff like that. It's all very good, and a nice type of comedy. I think for me, and I don't know if this was because it was set in a place like GTA Online, that I was never so aware of the mechanics of a documentary filmmaking. And like you said, a lot of documentaries do this where they're, not to say disingenuous with what they show, but they try and recreate things that have happened naturally. They try and almost restage things and try and get people to say things in a certain way. There's a really good TV show, the new Nathan Felder one, where he actually plays a character who's a documentary filmmaker, and you actually get to see the curtain behind how you get people to say certain things in certain scenes, and it's behind the curtain, if you will. And I don't know if it was because the whole movement of these characters around this place is staging in itself. I found a lot of this felt very falsified, and it's not a problem that it is falsified. It's a problem that it's felt it, and I could very much feel I could feel the manipulation, or I could feel the storyboarding of this while I was watching it. And on one level, like you mentioned, it is interesting that you get to see how they're making Grand Theft Hamlet a documentary while they're also trying to put on a production of Hamlet. But as a work onto itself, in the way it's presented, I found it very distracting each time they're trying to show it in a way that this is happening organically. Like from the moment they run to the place away from the cops, and then they find this venue, and they're trying to make it look like this is the first time they came across it. Could be wrong. They might have filmed it. That might have been the moment, but I doubt it. And it didn't feel like that. It felt like a reenactment. A lot of these scenes felt very much like reenactments of, oh, this is how it was, and we didn't capture it at the time, but wouldn't it be great if we put it in anyway? And in terms of some of the humorous scenes that I felt recreated, that's fine because you get the payoff of the joke. But when they tried to do it in this way, it really rubbed me the wrong way, and there's just something almost disingenuous at a certain point in this movie that I didn't like. And the scenes where the wife and him are talking, and she's saying, you missed my birthday, and oh, I wish I could hug you now, and then she says, you can, you're in the other room. I don't buy it. It was quite distracting, and I felt like that's definitely something they discussed, not something they felt. And that was definitely a conversation they had, but it didn't happen in the game. It happened outside the game. And then they tried to bring it into the game. And at a certain point, yeah, it just rubbed me the wrong way a bit. And it was, at this point, it worked against the movie for me. And obviously you mentioned the character of Mark. And I definitely feel like there's a genuine part of that story there where this is probably the only thing he has going for him. And you made a very good point with that he might be older, and maybe that's the way he does see himself with the avatar. And actually, I saw a documentary called We Met in Virtual Reality, where these people date in virtual reality. And the whole documentary, should I say, is set in this virtual reality place. There's lobbies and everything like that, and a lot of people's avatar is a reflection of how they feel and how they see themselves and how they want to be. So you might have a point that he might be older, and I do feel that he didn't have anything going for going for him in terms of a life, a wife, or a family and whatnot. And I thought there was some heart there. But again, just the way this documentary was crafted at times, when he has this argument with his friend, I don't know, this documentary, I guess the best way to describe it is it lost the trust of me at a certain point. And certainly in the second half as well, where I think it's the main guy, not Mark, the guy whose wife or is doing the documentary, they start to get a little bit preachy. And I'm thinking, don't Adrian Brody me. Don't Adrian Brody me. And they start doing this soliloquy and kind of trying to work it in with Hamlet and talk about how terrible life is and tries to bring a resonance to the documentary that isn't there in those moments for me. Now, there is a lot of resonance in the documentary, in these small scenes that you've talked about, like that scene with the guy who moved to Finland and he recites the Quran. Very good, very chilling scene. Like not chilling, but very striking scene. And there's a few scenes like that where someone comes to watch and you don't really know much about them, and then you just find out a little bit about the character, and all those scenes felt a lot more genuine to me. And I felt like as it moved away from the very funny comedy, the great conception, the whole trying to build to the play and trying to see if they can do a performance. Like you said, when the guy bails on him, who plays in the football team as well, and it's because he's got a job, like that's the great moment. So it might have sounded like I'm too negative on this documentary. I think there's a hell of a lot to admire. I laughed a lot in the first half. It lost my trust at a certain point. But ultimately, I had a decent time. I think it's very unique, very original. They did the best possible job they could do with this concept, I think. And how much mileage they got out of it is probably as far as you can go in this. So there's a lot to be commended.
Hey man, on 9% battery here now on a probably one of the worst smartphones still out there. In fact, who knows if I'll even make it through this voice message. Really, I'm just kind of defiantly maintaining this phone at this point. I've looked at buying a new one and always kind of like not found what I want. And I was like, you know what? Let me just run this absolutely into the ground at this point. It's almost become like an experiment to me at this point. Like how bad of a phone can you possibly retain? But anyway, as long as it gets these voice notes out, that's the main thing. I'm glad you came away more positively than I'd anticipated when it came to Grand Theft Hamlet, although obviously you liked it a lot less than me. I think a lot of the time when I like a movie more than you, or you like a movie more than me, not all the time, but a lot of the time, I think it comes down to like being bothered by one aspect of the movie, or kind of rolling with it and not caring that much about that thing. Like, I think the extent to which this film is manipulated and artificial and fake, we would probably agree on. I think we would agree more or less on the extent to which it is fake. But we've come away with completely different feelings, or like it's corrupted your experience with the film much more than it has mine. And I think sometimes, a lot of the time, I notice when I talk to you about movies that our respective experiences with the film really hinge upon the mood that we were in, or the preconceptions we had, just the night that we watched it, how tired we were, like things that could have swung one way or the other, rather than like deep-seated preferences. But I don't know if that's the case with this or not. I know for me, having been quite close to documentary film, I've had friends who are documentary filmmakers and been involved in making documentaries and stuff like that, and obviously, like yourself, watched many documentaries over the years. And I kind of came to a conclusion a long time ago that documentary film is just another genre of fiction film. It's as much fiction film as Jurassic Park or Inception or something like that. If you hold it to the rigor of accurately documenting the reality of something, whether it's a subject matter or whatever, a sequence of events, then I think you'll come up empty-handed 99% of the time. There will occasionally be documentaries where it's like, yeah, that isn't really like tilted for entertainment value or arguing a specific point or more beautiful artistry. That is literally just like as close as they could get to representing the reality of that subject or that environment or those people or whatever it might be. But that's so rare that when I sit down to watch a documentary, I'm like, yes, I'm going to probably be informed about something real, but no more than if I watch Erin Brockovich, or even if I watch like Titanic, or any film that has some root in reality. And even like science fiction and stuff like that is often so evocative of real things, and shines a light on real concepts to such a large extent. But I just don't see much of a division there. So I'm not like this when I see a documentary film and I'm like going, okay, they made this person seem more bad than they are. They made this situation seem like it was tighter and more time constrained than it was, and all this for the entertainment value. That doesn't really bother me. I'm conscious of it, but I'm much more bothered by the conviction that some people have that documentary film is some sort of like pure journalistic attempt to capture reality than I am by a film being unreal. So anyway, that's just to say that I agree with everything you said about how the film is staged and disingenuous in terms of like it's presenting itself as like this really happened, but that doesn't bother me at all. Like, as you know, one of my favorite films is Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, which we have both seen, and is to me a documentary film. It's a documentary film about a dive bar, and I think its only purpose that it serves is to be a good film to watch. It doesn't matter that they basically, I don't want to say hired, but yeah, they basically hired all of those people to be there at that bar to make a movie, and it's completely orchestrated and organized by the documentary filmmakers. It's also full of reality, and I think that's just what you get in a film, whether you're watching a documentary or an acted dramatic feature film. You're still getting a mixture of reality and crafted, cultivated storytelling. And that's not me saying that you shouldn't be bothered by this stuff at all. I'm not arguing. I'm just saying, I'm trying to explain why, for me, I wasn't bothered by that. And as I said, and you mentioned this as well, I felt like I was watching the making of Hamlet and the making of Grand Theft Hamlet, and I felt like both were very audacious and ambitious projects. Both required a lot of invention in terms of like this world is not a place where you put on a production of Hamlet, but also this world is not a place where you have relationship quarrels or you frame shots to capture a narrative or whatever. So in both of those productions that they were putting on, Hamlet and Grand Theft Hamlet, there is a lot of interesting, creative challenge to observe. So I fully enjoyed the undertaking of both of those tasks and kind of seeing how they influence each other and stuff like that. So yeah, it's something that we agree on, that is in the movie, and for me, wasn't a stumbling block. If anything, it was a value add to the film. This is something that I see in every documentary I see, but in this case, it was like more interesting because I'm like, oh, how would you make a documentary in GTA Online, as opposed to if I'm watching, I don't know, King of Kong, where I'm like, well, I know how you make this documentary, but you know, I guess they got to make it for me to see it. Nice reference to American Movie, another one of the great documentaries. You know, what I was talking about with my wife afterwards was interesting the way a lot of my favorite documentaries, like American Movie, like King of Kong, like Kung Fu Eric, or like Capturing the Freedmans. It could be dark subject matter, it could be comedic. They are somewhat exploitative in that they get people who obviously are happy to be in the documentary, and it's not like they like con them into it necessarily, or they film them secretly or something, but the people don't necessarily realize that they're sort of the butt of the joke. Could be a comedic joke, or it could be a dramatic joke, just like The Jinx or something, where it's not comedy, but it is essentially, we're going to mine you for content. And there's this sometimes a bit ugly juxtaposition between the sort of sophisticated filmmakers who are very knowing and don't put themselves out there, don't express any of they don't show themselves warts and all. They might they might pretend to show something unflattering of themselves, but ultimately they realize that they're gonna construct a piece of work where they come across either non-existent or well, and then the subjects are the subject of ridicule. And I love a lot of documentaries that you can level that criticism at, but it is something that's always there. And it's you know, there's plenty of documentary filmmakers who've made an entire career out of that. Like Louis Theroux, for example, where they might even be savvy enough to know that they have to come across as very empathetic and like sensitive and polite and nice to their subjects, but really it is just find another schmuck who's going to agree to this, you know, rinse them dry for all the content I can get out of them, and then, you know, leave them, move on to the next person. And, you know, I'm not going to like sort of dive into a massive like ethical conversation about that, but this film is interesting because in this one, the main characters are the filmmakers, and they seem like really nice people. Like they, as I said, they do meet people from time to time that they could mine for content, and they don't. But the thing that you don't get is you don't get a character on the level of like whatever his name is from King of Kong, or any of the, you don't get the guy from American Movie. You don't get characters that are 1 in a million. Somebody needs to point a camera at this person because this is just gold every time they open their mouth, kind of thing. They themselves are just regular people, and I think that they come across really well for me. They're quite likable. I could easily see this film being very obnoxious if the protagonists weren't likable people. And of course, it's completely subjective. I'm saying I like them. So it's interesting, like making a documentary, not exploiting anyone, putting yourselves as the main characters, but you're not particularly interesting people, but because the activity that they're undertaking is very interesting, then I think that works. But I don't know, it's just kind of like an interesting thing of like the two types of documentary. Are you documenting other people, or are you documenting yourself doing something? Then you got things like Super Size Me, where you're documenting yourself doing something, but you're kind of YouTubering it a bit more, maybe because they don't appear on screen, or maybe they do appear on screen, but their on-screen appearance is so loud and wacky, and the world that they're in is so wacky that they themselves don't. In fact, it actually works better that they juxtapose the inherent insanity and mayhem of GTA Online with a more sort of level-headed way of speaking. Even when they speak with other people, it feels like the other people are more irreverent. Obviously, they don't know they're being filmed or whatever. So there's always just like an interesting kind of transaction between their rhetoric and everything that's happening around them in the world. So I liked that. But it was, I don't know, just something came to mind. And you mentioned about like trying to bring Shakespeare to this violent world. After I watched the film, I went on YouTube and I watched an interview with the director, well, the co-directors, who are one of the guys and his wife. And he made a great point, which hadn't occurred to me. But you know the way they always say, like, when Shakespeare was actually on stage producing films, producing plays rather, and writing them, and I think acting in them as well. I think he acted, but maybe he didn't. But certainly at the Globe Theatre, when the company was putting on stuff, people were screaming and shouting and throwing rotten fruit and hooting and hollering and laughing, and coming in and out, and passers-by, and it was just mayhem. I've actually been to the Globe Theatre. I'm not sure if you have, and the way that they show Shakespeare there, they try and present it in a more raucous fashion, with the expectation that there's going to be audience interaction. People are going to shout stuff out. People are going to heckle. That was the atmosphere of Shakespeare. And the plays, I've only seen it presented that way once, because I've only been to the Globe once. But of course, I've also seen like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, and occasionally I've seen Shakespeare done in a way that has that energy of like a really chaotic, messy, vulgar, aggressive environment. And it feels, I don't know, I'm no Shakespeare scholar, and I'm not familiar with all of his work, but it makes sense to me that is the way that these things were written, that they were written under the expectation that they would be performed in a chaotic, loud, raucous environment. So watching this film, and this didn't occur to me when I was watching it, but it's a great observation that the guy made. I don't know why he didn't mention this in the documentary, because it would have been a nice element to it. But people coming in and out, someone falls down halfway through or something, maybe one of the performers drunk or whatever, even just all of the stuff that happens around the play when they go to the apartment and stuff like that. It's so Shakespeare in a weird way, but it's not what we think of as Shakespeare. And I love that scene where they go to the apartment, and every time they go to a nightclub, or everyone's getting drunk, people are doing this, that. It's a hangout movie. It's kind of like, like I say, Dodgeball by Ben Stiller or something, where you're like getting a team together to do something, but everyone's a bit of a mess. Everyone's got baggage. People are non-committal, coming in and out. Like, it's really nice to see that. There's so much cool character stuff in this movie. And it's such a hangout movie, because they're literally two friends hanging out on GTA Online. So getting like a super ambitious and super like literary, highbrow, prestige production, arty movie like Maestro or something, mixed with like some sort of like stoner hangout kind of thing. It has a lot of different vibes sort of convalescing into this really unique experience that I valued a lot. And yeah, I don't know. It's been a couple of days since I watched it now, and I was thinking the other day, like I watched it on my laptop, but like this film would have been great to see in the cinema, weirdly, even though GTA itself was literally not designed to be seen in the cinema. But I just think it's such a sensory overload. And I suppose the one thing I would say is I feel for the filmmakers, because I just don't think, I think they struck gold with this. And I think now they have a huge challenge on their hand of like, they probably will get the funding, and they've probably got the cachet right now to get another documentary funded or whatever. But what do they follow this up with? Do they go, oh, let's make something in Fortnite, or let's just make a documentary about like intersectionality between like old and new cultures? Whatever they do, I think this is the perfect, as you said, even you with your criticisms of it, is like they couldn't have made any more out of this film than they did, sort of thing. So it's going to be a tough act to follow for them. But it's great to see this, and it's also I hope that this is a point of inspiration for other creatives, other filmmakers. As I said, making stuff within game engines is like a time-honored tradition that goes back, decades. But to see it get to this level, and to think about, like, there was another documentary came out a couple of years ago called, I think it was called Enter the Matrix. Fantastic documentary about simulation theory, and that has loads of like, it looks like in-game stuff, or it's kind of like crude 3D models and stuff. And I just think that we need to start mining that. So people nowadays are spending so much time playing video games, so much time looking at aesthetics like GTA Online. To see that start to seep into quite far removed areas of culture, like literature or whatever it might be, is, I think, exciting. Especially given 90% of films you watch, or 99% of films you watch, they're just going to look like films have looked for ages. So yeah, very exciting movie, and curious to see if it leads to anything else.
Yeah, I think with Grant of Hamlet and documentaries in general, it's not so much that I don't accept that there's a magicianry when it's documentary filmmaking involved. It's not really that was my ultimate problem with this movie. But like I said, there's so many positives and so many things to be commended, as I said. But what I also would say is that I became very aware of the tricks and the mechanisms of the documentary filmmaking. I perfectly accept that most documentaries are contrived in many ways behind the scenes. And certainly there's a storyboarding to them, there's an editing, there's a presentation of words and conversations often that are not quote unquote authentic, or as authentic as would be as you're just having a hidden camera, I guess, is the only way you can really make it authentic. But the best way I can akin it to is when I'm watching a movie, and if I'm questioning, hey, that doesn't make sense. Oh, that doesn't really make any sense why they're doing that, why that's happening. Or if there's a contrivances in a movie that, I guess, getting in the way of my enjoyment of that movie. We've had a big conversation about contrivances before, so we'll certainly sidestep that. But just in terms of, there's various things in filmmaking that can be very distracting, and I think the documentary version of that is when something is presented as a documentary and as presented as real, but at the same time there's lots of things in it that are so distracting and acting in counter to that it takes away from, on one level, what it's trying to do. And I guess that is my version of that distraction in Grand Theft Hamlet. Now, I would completely agree that the best way to interpret this and the best way to watch this as is to watch it as the making of Hamlet as much as it is the making of this documentary, and almost as a behind the scenes feature as something's being made, if that makes sense. And it seems like you've been bang on the money with the best way to watch it, and you naturally did that. And when I see something acting as a documentary, then it's very hard to switch now that, okay, well, it failed in that way for me, so now I'm going to look at it through this angle. I couldn't really do that at a point because I was looking at through a lens that ultimately didn't work for me to begin with, whether that's due to me or due to the film itself. Who knows? But what I will say that's also very interesting about this, having thought about it quite a bit later, is just what it says about the power of what you're able to do through the medium of gaming itself, and even role playing. And role playing is a subject in games that's very fascinating to me. And apparently, Celine Young, is it? Can't remember if I got the name right, but she done that. She's the director of Past Lives. She put on a production of the seagull in The Sims 4. Now, the seagull in The Sims is certainly a lot more easier to stage than Hamlet in Grand Theft Auto, for sure. But it is something that has to be said about the role you choose to play certain things and what you use certain mediums for. The idea that in this world that you are essentially playing a character, because by the very instrument of an avatar and controlling somebody, you are playing a character, and you are playing a character that's in this virtual world that's almost counter to the ethos of this world. Forget about the documentary of this, because to some extent they actually had to manifest and stage this behavior in the world and essentially role play as these Shakespeareans and role play as themselves, and almost a hybrid version of what they can do. I mean, they still got guns, they've still got the option to take out people by force, but they're choosing to speak to these people and reason with these people within the mechanics of this game. And that is ultimately fascinating to me. I know my sister, she used to play Grand Theft Auto on my PlayStation, and she'd be going around and she'd be following the rules. She'd be stopping at the red light. She'd be trying to help someone if she ran over them and waiting for the ambulance. She'd be trying to really play it as a good citizen. And there's actually scope in Grand Theft Auto to play the game by its own rules as a good citizen. And they took that to another level in the online version of this, where they are trying to play roles of artists, trying to use words and their microphone in this world to reason with people. That is that is something. And I really like what you said about the history of Shakespeare, which I couldn't really give a fuck about in terms of his plays, but just the adaptions and how there was a raucous crowd and the actors would be delivering their lines while people throwing stuff at them, and the play was set up in that way. That adds another layer of this that's a lot to think about as well. So certainly a very unique experience, and I'm definitely glad that I seen it, and I would definitely recommend it to other people as a singular experience that you're not really going to be able to replicate somewhere else. Oh yeah, and just a final thing as well that I forgot to say. The way the people were able to express themselves in this game as well, where they're delivering the lines, whether it's through the voice and the dialogue of the in-game mic, but also the way they use the in-game emoticons, or whatever the fuck it's called, to deliver these lines and punctuate these words. That is taking gaming and taking this role-playing hybrid of voice work as well to another level. So they might be onto something with this experience that we don't even know what it can manifest itself into.
Yeah, it's funny, the way you're describing your sister playing GTA, I'm reminded of the fact that at least in one of the GTAs, if not in a few of them, I remember there's actually at least one mission where you have to follow the rules of the road. You can't speed and you have to stop at red lights and all that kind of stuff. And anytime I've played GTA, which I've played most of them, I've always enjoyed, at least momentarily, slipping into that, like, I'm just going to wait behind this car until the light turns green. And then I'm going to like, gently peel off into this lane. And I'm just another NPC. I'm just another citizen of San Andreas, whatever city it happens to be. And I think it's because those worlds are so well realized that even though the game is in no way set up for you to sort of play it like it's The Sims or something, and just like really like, play it for real, just on an aesthetic level, because it feels like a real world in many ways, at least by video game standards. There is some sort of appeal to like just role playing and to be like, oh, I'm just going to like walk down this street, and like GTA 6 is on the horizon now. It's allegedly coming out this year. And, I presume like GTA 5 or GTA 3, it'll be like this insane leap forward in video game. Like it will be like mind blowing. This is like a new level of what games can be like. And so I'm curious to see how much it allows for that kind of playing it differently than the most obvious way of engaging with it. Obviously, this movie, they've taken it to an extreme extent. It's GTA Online rather than GTA 5, but still, just like there is a massive appeal to like, I'm just going to sit on this bench and look at this sunset or something. And I wonder how much effort or time is being put into GTA 6 to kind of accommodate that. I know that like Red Dead Redemption 2, which was their last game, was, they put loads of effort into just the little details of making it seem more immersive and really making it feel realistic, like a real place that you're in and a real life that you're living, kind of. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. And yeah, on that stuff, like with the like, faking it and that kind of breaking the illusion, or like not liking the stage stuff, it's interesting. I think maybe, and this might not be the case, but if we just look at it from the basis of this movie, I seem to have more of a tolerance for it in documentary, and you probably have more of a tolerance for it in fiction. The sort of like, I don't buy that kind of thing. Yeah, anyway, a very interesting movie, and I was thinking this would be great. Like I've mentioned a few other movies while we've been talking, like the Pepe the Frog documentary. I forget what it's called, but also Enter the Matrix, which is another documentary, and this is a documentary. So maybe it's mostly documentaries, but this like these movies that are coming out now that are incredibly modern, that are just aesthetically and subject matter and everything just so different to what we've seen previously. I think if I was trying to think of like a fiction, or not fit, but like an acted dramatic film that maybe is in that wheelhouse, it'd be that one with Riley Keough that was based on a Twitter thread about like two prostitutes in Miami or something like that. There's a handful of movies that have come out in recent years which feel incredibly modern and feel like that film couldn't have come out in the 90s or the 2000s. That is a very, very, very modern day movie. And, I guess there's not many of those. Like people always say, like, culture now is just like much less distinct. You look at something from the 90s, it couldn't have come out in the 80s. Something from the 80s couldn't have come out in the 70s. But most stuff that comes out now could have come out in the 2010s or the 2000s or the 90s. Like you could tell that it wasn't made then, but there's very little difference in terms of like fashion and sensibilities and stuff like that. So these films that are like, this is very much of its time, of the current time. It'd be great to throw them all together in a list or a film festival or something and just like get a little look at like movies of right now. I guess all of those movies that are like the Screen Life movies or whatever they're called, Searching and things like that, where they take place within Facebook or Zoom or whatever, they would be other kind of examples of that. But even less so that, because that, if you look at movie Host, that could kind of be Skype 20 years ago. There's something about like the editing and the aesthetic of some of these movies that are like, everything we're seeing on screen here is just like screaming 2020s forever. So that's interesting. We don't often get to see a movie that just feels like uniquely 2020s. Even though GTA Online has got to be like a decade old, but I guess it's just been so loaded up with meme costume. Like it feels like it's kind of moved forward with the times a little bit. And obviously this one has a lot to do with the pandemic and stuff as well. Anyway, we've probably talked about it as much as we can. I'll be keeping my eyes peeled for other movies like this and maybe what these filmmakers do in the future. And yeah, had a really, really good time with it.
Yeah, not much to add to what you said there, except that you've managed to name drop and compose almost the beginning of an abstract list of movies that have that 2020 onwards feeling, regardless of when things like GTA actually came out or the technology was first used. I would add Searching and Missing to that list. I know Facebook's older, but the fact that there's so much social media to kind of canvas through in that movie is certainly what we've seen only in the last 2 years and post-pandemic. And I mentioned it before as well. My life in virtual reality takes place purely in role-playing. So, yeah, there's a good little bones of a list that we've put together here.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.